The Combat FX node basically divides all of the elements of an ability and the flow of the game, allowing you to reorganize them as you please. It's the most advanced creation feature in pop-up dungeons, so users beware. It's definitely not one to start with, but it yields the most power. The Combat FX node must be contained within a subgraph that is triggered within combat. If it's not, it simply won't do anything at all. If I go back out, I can see that this dialogue node here is triggering when an entity starts a turn, and I've set the activations to 0. If you want to learn more about the dialogue graph, then definitely check out its video. It's very in-depth and actually covers a little bit of the Combat FX there as well. I'll double click to go back in, and now we're looking at this Combat FX node. Right away, we're going to notice that there's an entity filter type. Right now it's set to party leader. That means that no matter which entity began their turn, the target of this Combat FX would be the party leader. So that could be useful if the party leader is supposed to say something whenever anything moves, like an enemy, or whenever anyone starts their turn. However, we can set it to advanced, and then we get an entity filter. That's covered in its own video. The addition to that here is that we have a sorting, and we have an ability to keep all or just a count. If the selection type is set to none, it's basically like a static random. It's going to choose the same entity within the combat. However, you're probably going to want to choose randomize if you want it to be random. This feature here for none is best to just leave it as is for when you're keeping all. It will have basically no effect. You can also sort by rank, ascending or descending. And then, of course, if you're actually going to want any of these to make any difference at all, you're going to want to set a count. Otherwise, it's just going to select everything that the entity filter allows for. So if you wanted to set the entity filter to enemies, for instance, and you only wanted to keep one enemy, you would set the random to 1. If you wanted to select the highest or lowest, you can go by rank. And if you didn't really care which enemy is going to be selected, you could leave it as none. But for now, we're just going to leave it as is with keep all, and we can leave it as none. It really won't make a difference because we're keeping all. So now we're going to see what we're going to do with this particular trigger, which is set to entity starts turn. So let's say that we were in some kind of a lava cave or something to that effect, and we want every entity to have a burn at the beginning of their turn. You can handle this through a punishment, but you can also handle it through the Combat FX, and giving you more control and the capacity to add visuals, sounds, and even animations to the whole process to make it clear to the player that that is what is happening. They won't just see their HP tick down and all of a sudden get a little fire combat text above their head that says that they got hurt. They'll actually see a full display of fire burning them and maybe even the response from the enemy or character. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do that by saying entity which triggered this event. The entity which triggered this event is determined by the trigger itself, and in this case, entity starts turn, it would be the entity that started its turn. So now this is where the fun happens. We get to determine what happens to this entity that just began their turn. Since we're trying to go for a fire sort of burning effect, we're going to go into ability action. This is where we can use anything that an ability does, can be found here. We'll change it to just damage. And then you can set it to fire to make sure that it's going to mesh with our fire effect that we're going to add to this. You could make it magical if you wanted. Any of these things here, including the power, which is scaling typically, but can also be set to scale with party size or to be exact. You can even make it ignore defenses if you want. So you have a little more control than you would even in an ability. Next, we're going to select an effect. We can go into the play projectile effects. These are going to come with their own sound effects and everything, so you don't have to add an extra sound cue. You can just type in fire to see what sort of fire effects you can look through. Maybe fire up might work. You can, of course, play around with that. Just choose whatever you want. And then we can add text to it, combat text. So this combat text will be added in addition to the fact that we are dealing that 100 fire damage, which of course is scaling, so it may be more or less than 100. We can say, it's hot. Maybe you're trying to emulate Texas in the summer. And so it's hot. You're going to be taking some fire damage. You can control, of course, the color, the wait time that comes after the combat text. And this is just to help the player know, hey, there's something happening here that's special in this particular encounter or level. It's not just happening arbitrarily. Maybe you've told them that it's going to happen before, or they're just discovering it for the first time, but it's good to add this sort of combat text and things like this to help guide them and orient them to what is happening. We could also add an animation here. So if we're going to play the hit animation, because they're just getting hit, I can just select the hit animation. And I could play a custom animation. Maybe I was playing some music that makes them dance. I could select a dance there. But hit is good enough for now because, well, we're just hitting them with fire. If we didn't have a sound in our projectile effect, we can add it here. We can also add a custom vocalization cue if we wanted. The custom vocalization cues are basically going to be unique to the entities. And we can also add a camera control. So we can save the camera snapshot. That means we're saving where the camera is currently. Then we can make a camera move. The camera move has some controls, so we can make them basically viewed from the front at the lowest angle possible that the camera currently allows for. So we're going to look right at them, and we can say, wait until the camera is almost there before anything else happens. And at the end, we can also restore the camera. So now things are a little bit out of order. As you can see here, I'm going to be doing damage first, then following it up with the fire effect, then the combat text, and so on. So now what I can do is actually just drag and drop to reorder the effects into the order that makes the most sense. So of course I want to save my camera before I move my camera. So now I'm saving my camera, I'm going to move my camera, I'm going to deal the damage. I can, of course, move my fire up in front of that. And then I can play that hit animation there. I could possibly move it down here. This is not going to make that big of a difference. But then we're going to wait 1 second after that combat text and restore the camera. The restoring can be do not wait so that we can continue playing right away. It could also have the wait until finished or mostly finished. Mostly finished is because there's a nice little ease at the end of the camera move so that it doesn't snap. And therefore, if you didn't want that whole animation to play out, then you can just say mostly finished, and that would be probably good enough. If it's still not enough time for you, if you wanted the player to have more time to process what's going on, you can add a wait. Just make sure that that wait goes before the camera move, and you can control the amount of time that the wait is going to happen. Of course, you can also remove it. And now what we'll see is that every time that a person or a entity begins their turn, we're going to move the camera after saving the snapshot, play this fire effect, see the actual damage come up. So after that, we're going to see their play animation hit, and we're going to see the combat text saying it's hot right above their heads. It's going to wait 1 second, and then the camera will be restored. So if we're going to look at how that looks, I'm going to just add a level here, and we're going to make sure that the activations are set to infinite with the 0 right there. And it should happen pretty much every time. Let's see how that would go. Okay, so here I am in the level. I'm in the Giga City by chance, and I'm just going to start the battle here. So now Max is starting his turn. I move in, I look, I'm damaged, it says it's hot, and then we continue. So if I end my turn and I go to Mason.
Someone's got to deal with the fallout.
There it is again. And so on and so forth. Anytime that anybody or any entity begins their turn, we're going to see that. So possibly for something like this, you're not going to want to do a camera control because that's going to be a bit too invasive. But ultimately, it's up to you. So if I wanted to remove that camera move, it's very simple. I'm just going to delete all of the camera movement. And now this is just going to happen whenever an entity begins their turn. Note that you can come over here and actually say, instead of starts turn, begins to start turn. And that would make it happen at the very beginning. So if you notice there was that little pause before the entity actually began and then the effect happened, this would make sure that this is occurring right as they're beginning their turn. So now we're going to take a look at one more very complex use of this particular node. What we're going to do is go back out just to look at what we've done with the dialogue. And in the dialogue, all I've done is I've changed it to round starts. So that's going to be the very beginning of the encounter. When the fight actually begins, it's going to trigger. I'm going to make it just do it one time. So it's just going to happen once at the beginning of the first round. I could also control that here, as you might already know, through the combat filter if I wanted to start at the second round. But we're just going to do it at the beginning of the first round. This is going to happen. So what I've done here is in the entity filter, I've selected player. So now I'm looking for just the characters controlled by the player. I'm not using summon entities or transform entities. Then, very importantly, I'm setting it to randomize and count 1. So I'm just going to randomly select one player character. That's what's going on right here. And then what I'm doing with it is actually cloning that character. So the effect is going to be that at the beginning of the combat, you're randomly going to get a clone of one of your characters added to your party. So we'll just look at these options real quick. This is the initial state of the, in this case, clone, but it could be a different kind of an entity or a different way of selecting that entity. You have that control right here. You can do it from a list, which can be a specific character or a set of characters. You can make it fully random or a clone. The faction selection mode is a bit tricky to wrap your head around initially, but it's actually quite simple. What you're doing here is I've controlled that it's always the player, but if I said I was going to do entity which triggered the event, and let's say it's a turn start, I'm not sure if it's going to be a player or an enemy if I remove that, right? So here, what I would be doing is saying, whenever that enemy began its turn, I'm going to go by allegiance and always spawn an enemy or a friendly. But right now, since we know who it is that we're targeting, it's players only, we can just go by faction and set it to player. If I wanted an enemy, I would select dungeon there. The positioning is just, well, mostly cosmetic. There's some strategy here as well. So I can say in front of the entity that was targeted, I can do behind its allies, the enemies, etc., etc. These are, it's going to be sort of taking a center of mass of the groups. So it's a little bit unpredictable because of the shape that the enemies or the party might be deployed in, but you'll more or less get what is being stated here. And then this is just facing. Do I want to face away from the entity that was targeted, along with the entity? It could be anything you want there. This controls the basic power level of the entity that is spawned. So in this case, we're scaling, we're ignoring party size, or you could ignore party size there, or set to an exact rank. And then you have the potency. So Swarm would be a weaker and Boss would be the strongest. And like I said before, this is where you get to choose what we're doing. We're doing a clone. You could add tags to that entity to keep track of it and control it in other ways with other nodes. And finally, you can override its name. So maybe it's not as confusing. Add a prefix or a suffix. So you can just do '(s) clone. So now it would be whoever's targeted. Let's say it was targeting Max. It would be Max's clone. So we're going to go ahead and just launch in and see who we get. So right now I'm deploying. I have not had the first round start. So right now I don't know who I'm going to get. We'll see. I'll just look at my party here and hit start battle and see who we get. Oh, looks like we got Max's clone.